computer. Very cool. Okie doke. Welcome to another episode of Going South. I'm excited tonight to get to talk with Treva Gear. She is, do you go by she? Pronouns? I should have asked.
Yes,
Okay.
yes, I go by she, yeah.
Yeah, she is what I would guess consider a progressive Democrat that recently ran for District 8 State Senate seat here in 2020. It was a pretty close race. She got about 37% of those votes. She is from the area, so she's a Southerner from Adel, Georgia. We were just talking about the fact that I lived in Adel and Sparks for a little while. She's also a veteran. She was in the military of the Army, I believe, from 2000 to 2003.
That's right.
She's a graduate of VSU. She got her master's degree at Troy State in Alabama and a PhD from VSU. And I'm assuming education leadership, maybe, or
no, it was actually an adult and career ed. So I got my PhD. Yes.
Okay,
yes.
Cool. Yeah, so she's currently an academic coach in the Lowndes County School system. I've been wanting to talk with her for weeks now. We finally made it work. She was really, really busy with her own campaign, but then was heavily active in the state Senate runoff too. So Treva, I just want to say first and foremost, thank you for talking with me tonight. I'm excited to get to know you a little bit, and it's a pleasure.
You're welcome. I'm excited for the opportunity. It's always nice to talk.
Yeah. So let me ask you this. Bear with me. I've got a chest cold. I can't seem to lose, but how did you get into politics? I mean, I'm assuming you enlisted fairly young, did a stint in the military, came back, went back to college. Like, what was your trajectory into the political arena?
Well, to be honest, it was never a plan. I never planned to go into politics.
That might not be a bad thing, though.
Exactly. I ran out of there was a need. There was a need for representation by the people. So I'll tell you, I first ran for office for the first ever time was in 2005. Actually, I ran for city council in Adel, Georgia.
Okay.
My hometown. And that was after having gone to college, because I did the whole college thing backwards anyway. I went to college, got my degree, and then I went into the Army. Okay. Which my mom thought was totally like, what are you doing? So either way, yes. So after spending my time in the Army, teaching a year of middle school, and then going back to school, I went in 2005. I decided I was going to run for office in Adel, Georgia, because there was a need for leadership. There was a need for representation for the people there. Yeah. Did that? No, I did not win that race. That's okay. So so then fast forward 2018, here we are. So because of the I ran for House District 175, and it was pretty much because people weren't getting represented. I'm saying common folks, the working class. I was looking at the fact that we were leaving funding for healthcare on the table where we could fund 500,000 additional Georgians, but because of the majority GOP legislature had decided that no, we're not going to take this money and we're going to leave it on the table. We'd rather our people be without healthcare. Right. When Georgia is one of the sickest states in the country, and yet we do that. And so I knew that people needed representation. There was a need for a living wage. There was a need for public transit. That's not just a city issue. That's a state issue. It's across this district issue. And so that's why I jumped out and ran, because the people had not had a voice for a long time, and they needed representation. And, I always taught my kids to be the change that you want to see in the world. And so I jumped out to be that change.
Gotcha. So you weren't a political animal in person in school running for city or, student council and all that kind of stuff. It was really in your adult life, huh?
No, I really was. I was a student council president.
Okay. Well, yeah. There we go.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Without,
No, I mean, I think that's really important, right? I mean, I think that's how people kind of start the process and learn, what it involves, and it often leads to other things.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I'm glad you brought up healthcare, especially because Georgia, I mean, even during Obamacare, didn't want to expand Medicaid. And we don't want to, I don't know if I'm being too harsh when I say this, but it seems to me our lawmakers, by denying people health care, are committing violence in a way that we treat. And I've lived in other places, and actually a couple of years ago, I was asked to stay in Canada and help out at a monastery of all places. And one of the things they told me, within 3 months, I would have health care. I would have a religious worker visa, and I would have full health care. And it was so interesting to be in a place with folks who never worried about being bankrupt in the event they got sick, you know. So I really grapple with, what does it mean that our nation, unlike most industrialized nations, denies its citizens access to health care? And I don't mean insurance, right? I mean health care. There's a distinction, right?
Right.
You know.
I think and I can share similar sentiments in the fact that it's kind of like if you have children, right? And your children don't have clothes and they're hungry, and you can't get them to the doctor. People are going to say you're a bad parent.
Right.
But when our legislators get up there and they deny people those rights, that's also negligent.
Yeah.
When you can do, but you won't do, you choose not to do. We need to look at that in the same way that, they're being negligent and people are suffering because of it. Look at what's going on right now. It's, with COVID.
Yeah.
It's just negligence. So
is that just political ideology? Is it because, the medical community's lobbying? Like what when you analyze why the GOP is so against treating healthcare as a right instead of a product, like what do you think is the biggest obstacle?
Well, I think it's a couple of things. You have to place people over party, first of all, because it's not about the party, it's about the people. Remembering why you're there, why you chose to serve in the first place.
Yeah.
It's really all about your constituents and the people, and not just the constituents that are in your party.
Right. That voted for you. Right.
Yes, it's Lottie Dottie and everybody that falls in your district, in your country, whatever. Making sure people have what they need. Also, when you go back to talking about, is it just political ideology? Well, the problem is that predatory capitalism. Capitalism is great. We believe in the free market. However, but when it becomes a predatory situation where you're wreaking havoc on working class people, on just common day folks, and keeping people tied into poverty and tied into illness because of it, then it becomes a problem. So it's no more about just making money. And that's the problem. People are padding their pockets and they're getting rich off of people getting sick. And that's when we draw the line.
Yeah. Can you say more about how you define predatory capitalism? Because I know Cornell West, a lot of folks use that phrase, right? What does that mean to you?
Predatory capitalism to me means keeping you oppressed in your situation, means that I can rise in power, that I can make money. So by limiting, by monopolizing, I keep you in your situation. And it's not just about making money. It's not about just the free market. Then it becomes about keeping a group of people down, where you're actually, golly, like a predator. You're it's kind of like I even go into the host and the prey, or the parasite.
Parasitic, yeah.
Yeah, it becomes parasitic, where you're hurting them. It's not benefiting you. It's not it's one thing that you benefit, but you're not hurting anybody else. But when your benefit hurts other people, and you're really just, you're getting over on them, typically, they're getting the bad end of the stick. It's no longer a good situation. That's when it becomes predatory. Me making money hurts you. Whereas in other cases, people can make money and do well, and that's great.
Right.
But when me making money hurts you and your situation, that becomes a problem, because it shouldn't work like that.
Yeah. Particularly, I mean, when I think about it, it's when my profit motive and willingness to accumulate wealth at your expense denies you the capacity to live, to have housing, right? To have access to affordable health care or free health care. That's where it becomes immoral,
Exactly.
Yeah. Well, and then, I don't get to talk with a whole lot of folks, but if you're a working class person here, there are plenty of predators out there, right? We're in this kind of predatory system, but then lending institutions, predatory lending, right? I mean, there's all these ways
Yeah.
that folks that struggle to get by are always kind of swimming upstream. So you're an advocate. I mean, is your agenda pretty progressive in the sense of kind of aligned with Reverend Warnock in terms of a living wage of $15 an hour, affordable health care? What were the things you ran on?
Yeah, I ran on, my big key thing was your affordable health care. Also a living wage, real pay for a work day. If you work 40 hours a week, you shouldn't struggle. We have people working in industries where they're still having to get public assistance because they're not paying them enough. They can't even afford insurance or other benefits because they're not paying them enough. So you're keeping them tied up into poverty.
Yeah.
Also looking at what was yes, real pay for a work day. Public transit was one as well. And because people can't get to where they need to get to, they can't get to those great jobs and those great educational opportunities if they don't have transportation. And education was also very pivotal because people having access to quality educational opportunities. That's from K through 12, us fully funding education. Education has been fully funded with the quality basic education formula that Georgia has for over, oh my gosh, since that formula was based off 1986 or something. That's too old. That's ridiculous. We're in 2021. So that's problematic. And then students not being able to gain access to higher education because the prices have skyrocketed so much, it becomes a luxury. Right. So, it's no more, okay, you can go to college where, well, oh my gosh, if you don't get Hope, because Georgia only has a merit-based scholarship, which is the Hope Scholarship. And if they don't have any needs-based scholarships except this REACH scholarship that they came up with. And that's only for a select few 8th graders that they appoint that to each year. And that's a problem.
Yeah.
So,
well, that just kind of leads into the massive amounts of student debt people have. Can we talk about Hope just a little bit? And one of the things I've complained about Hope, just having taught at the collegiate level for 20 years, is that, and I know some working class folks benefited from it, but it seemed to me to reproduce inequality. And what I mean by that is most of the students I encountered, and there was even a joke about this, and I can't remember where the cutoff was, but initially you had to have a particular grade point average to qualify, right?
3.0, and then you have to have those 4 advanced level or rigorous level courses.
Right. And that's kind of new compared to when it first rolled out, right? So it's been changed over the years, but many of the students who had 2-parent households with college educated upper middle class folks, were really set up to kind of cash in on this scholarship, right? And I would argue, I never got to see any data on this, but it concerned me because at UGA, for example, I had colleagues there that were talking about how students were talking about driving around in their Hope Mobile. And their Hope Mobile was their Volvo or some other high-end car that they had spent their college fund on because their parents had this money set aside because they were upper middle class, college educated families, right? But since Hope was going to cover everything, the kids would get these high-end cars, So I haven't seen data recently. It was when I moved to Oregon, it was interesting because people couldn't believe that we had that scholarship in the deep regressive South, but sometimes I wonder about, well, how much is Hope impacting the folks who would benefit from it the most in terms of, and not just reproducing inequality. So go ahead.
Yeah, and that's my concern with Hope is that it doesn't provide scholarship money to those who need it the most. Yeah. It's the students who are least likely, that those are students who are likely to get a scholarship from college, or they come from, like you said, an upper middle class family, and they are gaining access to these advanced level courses or courses of rigor, we call them, that you have to have 4 of in any subject area. Yeah. And so students who are most disenfranchised, your students who are underrepresented, are not going to gain access to those courses as much, even to qualify. Like you might have a 3.5 and
Right.
you didn't have those 4 courses that you needed or didn't know, and you didn't get those. So that's a major concern. And also, shucks, just the fact that because of the expense of hope and different things, and those students gaining access, not the ones that definitely need it, because we need to be focused on those students who need it so they can have access. They have actually lowered the amount of hours. They don't cover as many
Right.
hours as they did originally, because I
Right.
know I was a Hope Scholarship student. So
Am I correct to remember it even covered books initially, like when it first rolled out?
I think there was a book stipend. It's like $100,
Yeah.
$150 or something like that.
Yeah. It was
Yeah,
amazing when it rolled out, right?
it
In terms
was.
of what it covered. Well, and can we piggyback on that? Because is that lottery money?
Yes, that is some lottery money.
Yeah.
Yes.
Well,
Yeah.
one of the things that can I just offer a policy recommendation for you?
Go
Because
ahead. I got
you
my
know,
pen ready.
yeah, no. One of the things that troubles me is I'm an old man, and I remember when states were first contemplating state lotteries, right? And there was a lot of moral objection to it, and then liberal social scientists were saying that it's going to be a tax on the poor, right, and working class people, because that's who buys lottery tickets. So that's kind of another part of why I have problems with hope, particularly if it's just reproducing inequality. How hard would it be? So I've asked the Georgia Lottery for data in terms of how the money's dallied out, how those decisions are made. I've never gotten that data in terms of that process. But what do you think of the idea that that lottery revenue would be distributed based on the neighborhoods that bought the most lottery tickets? Because what we do know in upper middle class neighborhoods, which in Georgia are oftentimes white, right? Those folks aren't purchasing lottery tickets. It's working class whites, people of color who are working class. And you don't have to write this down. I'm just wondering what you think
Yeah.
about it. It seems to me that the communities that should benefit from the lottery are the ones that pay into the lottery. And they should get their proportion of educational resources, whether that would be a reduction in classes, whether that's technology, whatever it is. But right now, my understanding is, again, communities that don't really pay into the lottery are often benefiting from this revenue generated by working class Georgians. And it seems to be another way that inequality is reproduced. I mean, do you think, is that unfair to just throw out there?
No, I see your point. You have also some of that lottery money goes to Head Start and pre-K too, and some of those programs, which there's not every student can't gain access to pre-K either,
Right.
Because it's on a lottery system.
Right.
So that's even interesting. I would have to take that under study just to think about how that actually would be impacted versus us changing how the distribution of how the funding, who the funding goes to. That I think we need to make it more equitable, make it accessible to students who need it the most. So that would be coming from that distribution piece based on community and neighborhood. That might be a little bit more. That'll be interesting to see how that would actually work. This distribution, who would get cut out versus who would gain access.
And it'd be kind of almost like a property tax.
Yes.
Right?
That would be
proportionate to the communities that pay into it the most. That seems to me the fairest thing, and nobody ever talks about it. It just doesn't. When I guess that leads me into another question for you, as you were talking about school systems not working. Do you ever, because most liberal folks I know talk about the system being broken, right? And conservative folks in my life will say the same thing, but they have a different explanation for what's broken and how to fix it, right, than liberal folks. But those of us on the kind of far left argue, well, no, the system's not broken at all. It was never really designed to work for everyone. Like our school systems, for example, in Valdosta, when social movements forced desegregation. It wasn't as if the white system and the black system got together and finally came to terms with all the injustice and hired the best from both systems and built an inclusive system. What generally happened here and places across the country too is, right, the black system was basically shut down. You had principals that became janitors, like, so it. I think it sounds trivial to think about it this way, but I'm not convinced any of these systems were meant to work. And it seems like those of us who are progressive have been trying to get them to live up to the values espoused in our founding documents. Does that make sense? And let me use a different example. It might be helpful. When Hillary Clinton was running for the Democratic nomination, she said, we've always been a democracy, right? And that's just simply not true, right? That's simply not true. We're in a country that was founded by a white male aristocracy for other white male aristocrats. And they created our founding documents that since then, people and movements have been pushing the state structures to live up to those ideals. Does that make sense?
Yes, I see what you're saying.
Yeah, and I think I think how we look at these systems, whether it's the education system, the healthcare system, the lens we look through them at is that we're looking at them as broken, and then we generally reform them in conservative ways. We don't often get anything different because maybe they weren't designed to work. Whereas kind of more radical or critical lenses would say, no, they just simply weren't made to work. So how do we transform them into inclusive, fully democratic, fully functioning institutions?
Well, if you think about the beginning of schools in the first place, I'm saying you got to look at the Industrial Revolution and how schools were kind of set up, kind of like, like factories. Let's mass produce knowledge, driven kids. They're all going to come out with this skill and that skill. And then came the standards movement when they went to standardized testing. You had the report in 1985 in which they were saying, oh, schools aren't doing well. It started then. Then you had the standards movement. You had all this testing. Then we had this major testing movement, which we know that standardized tests are not great for students of color and students who are underprivileged. It does not show what they understand. So then they get caught up in the system once more as a form of reform, but that's not the reform we needed, where we test the stuff out of, just test kids ridiculously, because it's not all about the test. It's about, you go back to the basic, reading, writing, and arithmetic, which is critical, and come up with all these different ways that we do things that makes it even harder for students to learn. And we just need to get back to the basics. Lots of times it's because educators aren't making those decisions. And we're not at the table. And so you got legislators sitting places saying, hey, we're going to do this, this, and this. And nobody's talked to us. Nobody's asked us, what does that look like in a classroom, and whether it's going to really work, or whether it's really good for kids. For the fact that we have kids who graduate, who leave schools all over the country, who still can't read. What's with that? You get to high school and you still can't read. Those different things. And we all have those stories and those instances of where a kid has been left behind. If we go back and look at No Child Left Behind, big time with the testing. So I think that us looking at what we want schools to actually do. Do we want them to really empower kids and bring them out of their situation? Because the research says that schools re-stratify students back into society in the same way in which they came. So the problem is that we need to make sure we meet those needs. Is it truly empowering? And so if you have the right people at the table to do that, we can. But if we continue the Industrial Revolution style of, we're going to give it to them this way, and if you don't get it, too bad, you get recycled, then you just drop out of the system, and then boom.
Well, and that's what I mean. I mean, that's a great example of exactly what I'm talking about. They were kind of designed to produce obedient workers, for the Industrial Revolution, right? And then we had public educated, mandated, and so forth for some people, right? But so what we do is we then talk about the students as if they failed versus the system failing them. You know what I mean? And I'm not convinced that America, particularly white America, wants students that are critical thinkers, that know our history, that are creative, and like you said, empowered, that have a sense of themselves. And not only that, we're a nation of consumers. Not, I say this all the time, I don't think we're a nation of citizens. And there's a big difference. I taught in Tallahassee the last time I taught, and I had 60 students in 2 sections, all in their 20s. And I asked them one day who the governor of Florida was, and 2 people out of 60 knew. Not to mention city council, and I think a lot of people like this. We all want somebody else to fix everything. We're hoping that if we elect X, whoever that is, they're going to solve all our problems, and we're just not civically literate in ways. And I think we're also don't think we even have the right to change our country, to change our towns, to assert our agency a lot of times.
And that's part of, I would say that should be the big picture of us making sure we not produce, but maybe, yes, make sure when students leave us that they
facilitate a process.
Exactly. They're mindful that, they are that they're not going to be status quo. They're not going to be closed-minded. They're going to be open-minded, where like there's more ways to do this, that they're the problem solvers. And in Clemson, we're saying we need to create these types of students, but those are the students who are going to push you in the classroom as an educator. I don't know if educators are prepared to know how to handle that student who pushes those buttons, who's asking those questions, who takes you to the edge of the bridge. It's like, hey, but those are the questions that need to be asked. And so ultimately, because I was telling some students, because even though I'm not in the classroom, I still have a VIP. And right now I'm actually teaching virtual biology as well. But, in my VIPs and different things, and when I was in the classroom.
Tell folks what VIP is, just in case they.
Oh, I'm sorry.
That's okay.
Vikings Improving Performance. It's like our homeroom system. So, we give a lot of students, share information with them they need to know. If they're juniors, making sure they know things about the SAT, preparing them each step of the way to make sure they get what they need. So pretty much what we're in, I'm about to lose my train of thought here.
Oh, well, we were talking about empowered students and students coming out ready to serve their community, but also feeling the right to do that. You know what I mean? To use your word, empowered to address the social issues and ills and things we need to address.
But getting back to this, I was telling some students, I'm like, there are women that are in power and that sit in positions of power now, but yet they're in companies, or they're over companies that have allowed women to be paid less, the gender wage gap.
Right.
Why is that? And I talk to them about it, say, why is that still going on if we're educating women and women are in places of power, and yet they don't change, or they keep those things the status quo? Because we haven't taught them to break out of the box all the time, that breaking out of the box is okay. Breaking the glass ceiling is okay. Not being status quo is okay. It's okay to like John Lewis might say, Senator John Lewis might say, get in a little bit of good trouble for what's right. To stand up and speak up and be okay being the only person in the room that agrees with that, or is fighting for whatever the issue is. If it's something that's right and for the good of all people, why is there a problem? We don't teach them to deal with resistance. We don't teach them about the resilience, I don't feel, to be that only person, to be that unique individual with that unique idea that's gonna be for the good. And because it's kind of like, no, we're not ready for that right now. No, it's not time. Let's just wait. This is not the time. And that's the problem with progress. That's why we don't make progress in places.
Well, I think what you're saying is we don't help students become leaders.
Exactly.
You know what I mean? I know in college, for example, I've encountered a lot of 20-something folks that want to get involved and want to be leaders, and they would come and ask me, well, how do you become a leader? And I was like, well, I wouldn't consider myself a leader, but I don't think you get permission. I think if you're waiting for somebody to knock on your door and tell you to lead, now whether and I think a good leader develops other leaders. It's not we don't need another boss, right? We need people that share power, develop other other
Exactly.
leaders trade off roles, and we just don't have good models for that. Even in college, we don't. And it's been interesting to me that people have internalized that they don't have a right to do that, or they've got to get permission, even in the face of a variety of injustices that they personally encounter oftentimes. It's kind
Yeah,
of amazing
because
stuff.
it's not in the curriculum. And so
Yeah.
in spite of everything that K through 12 teachers are trying to, especially the high school, 9th through 12th grade teachers are trying to teach those students, unless they're in some type of extracurricular activity like, FBLA, or they can participate in some of those things, or FFA, or whatever it is, student government. They might, any other club where they're doing leadership, they may never learn. I'm saying they might not get it. They're not going to necessarily get it in the classroom because it's not necessarily taught. That would be something, a hidden curriculum. That would be an extra thing that an educator would decide that, hey, this is what I want to teach my students. In the midst of me teaching biology, I'm going to also teach them some leadership skills. I'm going to teach them I used to teach life skills, what I call life skills. I call it survival pack for life. It's like, you're not just going to learn biology, you're going to learn how to live in here, how to treat each other, how to respect each other, how to get along in this world, so those are the things. So it's just not in the curriculum, and it's like, it doesn't get taught.
Yeah. You mentioned you kind of lifted the spirit of John Lewis a minute ago. I saw the picture of you with him. Did you get to chat with him? I have a John Lewis story too, so we have something in common.
Yeah, I did back in 2018. So that was awesome. We were up in Atlanta at the state Democratic convention, and I happened to be in the right place at the right time. And I was like, yes.
Yeah. So did you know that was going to happen, or?
No.
Yeah.
No, I just happened to be in the area, and I looked because he was at the convention. He had spoke there, and I looked and I was like, that's John Lewis over near the elevator. I'm going over there. I'm going to meet him. And I did.
Yeah. I was in a post office in Atlanta when I taught at Georgia State, and I turned around and he was standing behind me. And I was like, you're John Lewis. I was like a starstruck groupie, it was a little embarrassing, but he was such a beautiful soul, and such a role model, like just amazing. So we chatted a little bit, but can we talk about the runoff and what's happening in Georgia? Because when I saw your campaign, I just go, this is the future. This is it seems to me, and help me if you have a different analysis, that I'm concerned at the backlash, right, in terms of Stacey Abrams is just a giant. I am not convinced that the GOP really believes in democracy. But, and I said that, you didn't say that, but what happened here was spectacular. Folks mobilizing. I know there was millions and millions of dollars that facilitated some of that, but that's not all that was going on. And it seems to me, in your campaign, you referenced a new Georgia. So I'd like to hear some about that. But do you know William Barber, Reverend Barber, the Poor People's?
Yes, I heard.
I just saw a talk by him with Cornel West, and he was talking about that the country is going through a second reconstruction in a way, because the demographics are shifting. We have massive inequality, and it seems to me that there's a push to be progressive and continue the work of the last 3 to 4 decades of progressive policy. And again, going back to living up to the ideals of the country in ways that include people who've historically been excluded. And at the same time, and I've said this a zillion times, there's been an effort to take us backwards to some mythical time when America was great. And the pivotal question is always, great for who? Right. I mean, do you feel that going on now? And are you concerned that now the state house, which is Republican dominated, is going to basically work very, very hard to disenfranchise folks that have been politically activated, particularly Black Georgians?
Yes, I'll say that. I'm saying, well, we've been experiencing that for the past 4 years.
Yeah.
So taking us back. However, I do see that as like some backlash will occur for sure. I'm saying it was already in the workings in December. They were talking right after the election. I'm saying after 2 recounts of the presidential election, and you're still talking about there's fraud and there's no fraud, and you have your own Secretary of State
Yeah,
and other
yeah,
agencies stating there was no fraud in the presidential election. Nothing happened. However, in 2016, there was a lot of things that went on, but nobody cried foul then when
right,
all those reports and the
right,
interferences from foreign agents came in, and nobody was being a patriot. Those who were applauding,
right.
that whole election, they weren't concerned about a foreign agent. However, I see that all of a sudden they're trying to get rid of no excuse absentee balloting, trying to get rid of the drop boxes,
Right.
trying to increase you're going to have to wanting people to have an ID, a copy of their ID sent with their absentee ballot. All those extra things, which is nothing but voter suppression, because as we know, absentee balloting has been around. We know the GOP was somebody who they backed that, they pushed that, they've used that for years. And now that you have a larger majority of your Black and brown communities taking advantage of absentee voting, that's what a loss of Democratic vote was
Yeah,
absentee ballots. So
yeah.
now what do? They want to hinder that.
Change the
That's
rules.
exactly. And those same people that applauded Martin Luther King and even have applauded Senator John Lewis to some extent will come back and actually undermine any of the work and efforts that
Yeah,
they did to get the Voting Rights Act in 1965, how they've hacked that. I'm saying they took out Section 5. Hopefully with this renewal of the Voting Rights Act and an updated one, we can stop some of the purges that have happened in the state of Georgia, mainly to Black and brown individuals. So there's work to do, and yes, there's going to be a backlash. That's why the work really doesn't stop. We're taking a little breath. We're going to
yeah,
be back at it soon. We got to get
yeah.
ready.
Yeah, it's amazing to me. When I moved to Oregon in 2014, I was telling somebody this a couple of days ago. I got my driver's license, registered to vote, and 2 months later, I had a ballot mailed to me that with multiple choices, with a book that told me who was running, what party they were in. You had ballot drop boxes, but you could also put it in the postal service. And I had 2 weeks to turn it in. And nobody, there was no problem with that. So it's interesting how the South, and, given especially our history of suppressing the Black vote, um, it amazes me. The other thing that I struggle with, well, and it seems to me that, and I'm not saying this about all white conservatives, but there is a fear of a Black and brown country, it seems to me. And the fact that you can't, I think they know they can't say that because then they have to admit they're not truly democratic. But Donald Trump has been sowing this whole narrative of a rigged election before he even won the nomination. When he was running for the
Yes.
Republican nomination, he was very clear about it's a rigged system if I lose. And to me, he was just doing that for his brand and to save himself from embarrassment. But for folks to, and I don't think a lot of them believe it. Some of them probably do, but to see that narrative take hold, I think to me, it just seems like a substitute and a surrogate for really what's going on. And I guess the question is what's going to keep the state house from doing that, from making voting even more restrictive or undermining all the folks that took the time to work hard, mobilize, get people to the polls. Um, what do you think is going to happen? Do you think, I guess what I'm asking, what I'm hoping for too, is that this energy that folks feel, right? That
Mhm.
there's a chance now. Do you think it will be lasting? I guess is what I'm trying to say.
You know what? It can be, because we got a couple of things that can be going for us. The fact that we have a new president in, and we can get we can actually get the Section 5 we can get the Voting Rights Act updated and get
Yeah.
it renewed,
Right.
and one this for present now, and actually and put Section 5 back,
Mhm.
because we needed Section 5, which prevented the states from just doing something without federal permission. to
Right.
do it. And that's what happened. They just went rogue here in Georgia with the number of people who've been purged for years. And so that's one great thing. Then the second was we're going to have to put pressure on the statesmen. We're going to have to put pressure on those legislators. I'm saying whether you voted for them or not, we need to make a noise and let them know we see you and we see what you're doing, trying to undermine and select your voters. So what? That Georgia turned blue, so you're mad. So you're like, no, we're going to undermine the vote, and that's just anti-democratic. Which for those individuals who also sided with that lawsuit filed by that Texas Attorney General, who's also under investigation and is rogue, and you sided with them, we need to be questioning your allegiance to who your allegiance is to, or whether you're there to serve the people or whether you're there to serve a man or party. So that's the next question. Then the third thing is just being prepared for whatever comes. We have to be prepared to take whatever hit. If the hit is the absentee balloting, we're going to have to be prepared on the defense, ready to go to whatever that change might be, to adjust fire and do what we need to do. Yeah. So that's all we can do. Plus, you have a fourth issue at hand. Because of the census, they're going to be doing some redistricting. Yeah. And we're already here.
Let's just call it what it is, though. It's gerrymandering.
It's gerrymander. I'm saying if you look across the state of Georgia, except for the districts in which they pack the lost African Americans in it, like District 177, you'll see that it's about 60-40, 60-40. How you get 60% Caucasians and then 40% African Americans in almost every district? Something's wrong with that. And hopefully some legislation from the federal level will start to look at those types of things, because we need independent authorities to be drawing these lines anyway, so people can stop picking their voters. So we're just going to get ready for whatever and be ready to fight and get at it. But it starts now.
Yeah, I think you're right. It seems to me that the GOP, especially at the federal level, has known for a long time that the demographics were shifting. They know who folks of color generally vote for. They know who immigrants vote for, unless they're Cuban, right? There are, certain Latino groups that vote Republican. And some of that's shifted a little bit, right? But it seems to me that for a number of decades now, they've been prepping, through gerrymandering, through voter ID laws. And again, they can't say we really don't want this group to vote, right?
Right.
So you have to couch it in this language of redistricting or voter IDs, or that there's massive voter fraud. I talked to James LaPlante, a political scientist, and when he was on the podcast, I was asking him, so what does the political science literature say about voter fraud? He said something to the effect of you have a bigger chance of getting struck by lightning twice than having a problem with voter fraud. And the SOCH says the same thing. So the established science on voter fraud in a country where on most, national elections, 50% of registered voters don't even bother to vote. The problem has been voter apathy. It's not voter fraud. This year was different, though. And it does seem like folks don't truly believe in democracy unless their side wins. Would you support, because in Oregon, while I was there, I think the other thing that I would love to see some discussion about is the disenfranchisement of convicted felons. It seems to me that a person has done their time, they've paid their price for their crime, they shouldn't be disenfranchised as citizens. And I'm pretty sure in Georgia that's still the case, isn't it?
And I think if they don't have any, because there's been some changes with that too. But yes, I totally agree. Yeah. I'm saying if you've done your time, like what are you gonna do? What's the harm in a felon? But you're still a citizen. Yeah. Like why can't you vote? So yeah, I think that's important that we restore those, because we actually registered someone to vote who had been, they had been finished with fines and everything for several years, probably a decade, and had never voted because they didn't know they could vote. And we got them registered to vote. Yeah. In the for the runoff election. Like, it was amazing. Yeah. So yeah, and like you said, voter education, because people don't know what's going on. That's another thing. People, once they vote for somebody, they're so disconnected from knowing what in the world is going on or what those people actually do. So we got lots of voter education, just civic education, because to let people know this is what these people do, and yes, they're accountable to you, and yes, you can call them and demand this, that, and that gets done. Even in your municipal elections, people are disengaged with city council positions and other appointments because they have no idea what they do. They're disconnected from it, but yet they're still struggling at their house. And that's where the apathy comes, is that, okay, I elected you, you're supposed to help me, and I'm still struggling. And,
Right.
I don't have time to vote. I'm just struggling.
Yeah.
I'm just trying to make it. I just got to go to work.
Yeah.
And you have to just understand where that person is coming from. Yeah. It's kind of like The Pedagogy of the Oppressed by Paulo Freire. You probably read it.
Yeah.
So, and it kind of explains why why people start to feel the way they do and become apathetic.
Well, that, and it seems to me that most of the time local politics are where you do have some accountability, because where folks live. You might go to church with them. You can go actually talk to them. But even, I've been really disappointed at kind of local politics. And I don't know if you've heard some of the recent comments by the mayor.
Yes, I listened. I listened to those recordings. Yes.
It troubled me deeply because it has all kinds of overtones, but it kind of goes back again to this thing of making false accusations. And I think also just disrespecting, whether you're a Democrat or not, the fact that citizens are participating in the political system should excite us, and so so to suggest that they were paid to do that, when I know so many people, and there were canvassers on city council that weren't paid. So I found some of that commentary very revealing, and I see it permeate among others in the GOP in a way that just really disturbs me.
Yeah, I was a canvasser. I'm saying, which I was canvassing. I was leading groups of canvassers. I'm saying I didn't stop after my election. So I had young people out there canvassing. Yeah. So, and we were actually canvassing. We actually went to the doors and all that.
Yeah. Well, and I mean, I don't know. Did you have
the fly on the door? Well,
yeah, exactly. There was just some beautiful stuff. Yeah. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
I just gotta laugh. Go ahead.
Yeah. Well, I mean, there were some beautiful stories that came out of that. I heard stories of folks voting for the first time and they were in their 60s.
Yes, I gotta tell you this story. I registered, not registered, but I was able to, because you knew about the whole snafu on the south side of over at the Mildred Hunter Center on the night of the election. Oh yeah, there was a train that sat on the railroad tracks for 2 whole hours from 4 o'clock till 6 o'clock, blocking Fry Street, blocking people from getting to that side of town. So of course, if you had to go vote, you were gonna, you're sitting there 2 hours and had to go drive all around and try to get over the overpass or whatever. And so what was crazy, at 6 o'clock when that train cleared, because there were 2 trains that were typically on that track at the same time, another train came 30 minutes later at 6:30 and sat on those same tracks. Now, what in the world? So we were able to call, get in touch with the DPG, the Georgia Protection, the voter protection hotline, and also here locally with the Democratic Party, getting some of our legal agents in place to try to get the hours, get the voting hour extended over there. And they were able to extend it till 7 o'clock. Well, no, not to 7, but till 8. Unfortunately, we didn't find out about that to 7:21. So my determination was to I was going to go find some voters and say, hey, the polls are still open. I think 5 additional people voted. I was able to go to a house over there in that community for which I had registered a young man and didn't know if he had voted. And so I went to the house. I was like, hey, man, I said, hey, it's Dr. Gear. It's dark at that point.
Yeah.
So I'm like, have you voted? Have y'all voted? He's like, no, neither he or his mom had voted. She had gotten home late from work and they had not voted. I said, come on, jump in my truck. We're going to vote. And we did. We went over there and they were the last voters in Lowndes County. On during the runoff election. Got them there at 7:55.
Wow. Did that get any press? The fact that those trains were parked there? And
you know what? It did not get it. I don't know if it got any press on the news. I don't recall hearing it on the news outside of a Facebook post that I posted. No.
Yeah.
But that was no coincidence. Trains don't sit 2 hours on election day. Yeah, that's interesting.
It's very interesting. So given, can we kind of jump up to the national level? A lot's happened in the last 6 weeks. Is that fair, fair to say, I guess?
Yeah, it's fair to say.
How are you feeling given the failed coup, sedition, attack on the Capitol, the then president's lack of response to that, in addition to not responding when people's lives were in danger? Yeah, like
I'll just tell you this. First of all, this is supposed to be the United States of America. I served under the flag, and I pledged to, to fight any enemy, foreign or domestic, and that we protect our democracy. And that's why we've gone to war with countries who allowed the same thing to happen, to stop coups and different groups like that from doing overthrowing those democracies. And then to sit on January 6th and look and see that happen in our very own country. And there wasn't a greater response by our commander in chief at that time. That was criminal. It was treasonous. Like, what side are you on? And it was just, I was just like, wow, not totally surprised.
Yeah.
Not surprised, but just like, wow, this happened in plain sight. Like, wow, there was no National Guard response immediately. It was as if you walked into Wild Adventures, took over Wild Adventures. It's too easy. So it concerned me from where the country was going and what was left for the next couple of weeks before we had our new president coming into office for that to happen. As a citizen, I was very concerned with the threats around the different state capitals and the concern with these groups who had been in power for the past 4 years and allowed to do and say the different things that they were, to be racist, to threaten people. We had hate crimes have risen in the country big time, So that was just majorly concerning for the safety of myself, for the safety of the country, all those things. And then I stopped and I realized that I remember back in the day when you could be a Republican and you could be a Democrat, and it was like, cool, like, big deal. You're a Republican. So what? I'm a Democrat. So big deal. Nobody's fighting. Everybody loves everybody. We just got some different points of view. Until the point that in 4 years, it has become, all I can hear is, it's the radical left. Like, we're like this, like Democrats are this enemy. So then you feel attacked for 4 years. The same thing repeat. I guess they got programmed like this new Jim Jones cult or something. That, wow. I'm like, this is crazy. You can't even have a different opinion now that, it's like, it's become like you're just like this enemy of the state. You're enemy of the state. And I don't like that climate. I don't like what we've become. But it also was a mirror to our country about who we aren't and who we are.
Yeah.
And it shined the light on a bunch of people about what their views are and who they really are, because they were emboldened and allowed by a top leader, a voice that people listen to be, feel, and do whatever you felt like doing, even if it was damaging to Black and brown people. We got kids in cages. What country is that? We pulled out, we're not with the human rights group. I have no words. I have no words. It's sad. It's like it was some dark years for this country.
Yeah. It seems to me, one of the things I've struggled with some of my Democratic friends that it seems to me that Trump was simply a symptom and brought stuff to the surface, gave it permission. It wasn't like he created this kind of the underbelly that was always here. And it also seems to me that it's bigger than Trump. I mean, the conservatives in my life, the conservatives I've tried to talk with, I mean, it's gay rights, it's women's rights. There's so many, it's the advancement of folks of color in terms of actually, having better access and opportunity. It's pretty much all the progressive changes of the last 30 or 40 years, combined with kind of inequality where people who look like me feel like they're cheated if everything's not going my way anymore. You know what I mean?
Yes. We cannot progress conserving and keeping things the way they always have been. Because when I think of just keeping things the old way, I think about slavery, I think about inequality, I think about segregation, I think about some of those things I didn't even experience with segregation and different things, but I think about going back to those systems that were popular for the majority, so for the white majority back in those days when there was, so now we're approaching a time where our country is so diverse, like you said, and that numbers are going to change, that whites will typically be in the minority. What the first projection was 2025. I don't know what the new one is.
2040 kind of.
Yes. So yes. So it's just it has been a mirror, like I said, to reveal some people in some places that we weren't, because people only do what you allow them to do. And we also realize that what do we do when the checks and balances don't work? When our Congress doesn't work to limit the power of the executive branch of the president.
Right.
What happens? And we don't have that in our Constitution. So we also need to look at making sure things are in place that when the Congress doesn't work, what happens then? Because we were at a very dangerous place in history. We were following the authoritarian playbook is what we were following. And we just have to be very concerned. So we're in a very fragile place. We're fighting COVID, as well as we still have people who are still saying that the election was stolen. And you're still seeing some of the conversations. And it's been what was it? The inauguration was last week.
Yeah, the 20th.
Yeah, the 20th. And so I guess we're just one weekend. I guess it will take a little while, but here we are. I was thinking in 2016, there weren't a bunch of people on the left. No Democrats got together and said we're going to overthrow the Capitol and storm it.
Yeah.
No, we just started.
Or 2000.
Right. Or 2000.
Or 2000. I was around for that one, when the Supreme Court decided who the president of the United States was, and Democrats rolled with it in order to, kind of keep the country together in a way.
Exactly. The world's been watching now. They're watching us. They see our enemies are watching. I'm saying it's like they were having, this is what they've been dreaming about. January 6th was their dream.
Yeah.
And they were hoping that something happened because it weakens us. Because if there's no enemy within, the enemy outside can do us no harm. But when we become an enemy to our own people and we start looking at each other like enemies, then we're in a dangerous spot. And I hope that over these next 4 years, we can begin to heal. Yeah. But there has to still be accountability for January 6th.
Well, I think, that's the thing. Yeah, that's the thing that concerns me is like how compromised are our institutions, including law enforcement, the military, and GOP senators who went along with this even after people died on the 6th. I think that's deeply troubling, and hopefully it will get addressed. But you and I are Southerners. The thing I think about is that, hell, I know people that are still pissed off about the Civil War, that claim that, you know what I mean? Like, folks hold grudges. Even they hold grudges about stuff they weren't even alive for, so I'm concerned. I don't know. Those folks ain't going away. Right.
Yeah, because they believe what they believe in, and in the past 4 years, it has been reinforced.
Yeah.
Positively reinforced, and
and endorsed, right?
Yes, and endorsed, because when you have after Charlottesville, and after all that happened, and the girl was killed, the car ran through the load of people, and then you got guys out there with the torches and the fire walking and marching, and you say those are just they're good people on both sides or whatever. However, I'm sorry, we have to start distinguishing them. You can't distinguish. It's a problem. What we ask out, and I have to say this because we always ask students, we have to ask young people, teenagers, if you see something, say something, do something, stand up for your peers. You need to speak truth to power. If somebody's bullying somebody else, you need to step up and say something. And we won't even be a good example for our young people. We're asking them to do more than what we'll do. We hadn't been standing up for people. We hadn't been saying, no, you're wrong. You put kids in cages. Oh, that's not right. What about your fellow man? What about love your fellow man now? But then when the tables turn, you're okay with, I don't care if it was the leader of the free world. I don't care if it was our president calling out people with disabilities, talking about women in the way that they did. It does not matter who it is. And that's the problem. And so we compromise. And now, so I don't know what kind of leadership, what students are supposed to think. What are young people supposed to do when the role models, the people are supposed to be modeling good behavior and kindness and love your fellow man and the golden rule, do unto others you would have them do unto you, have totally forgotten everything you taught the kids.
Right.
And you're agreeing with it. You're in the crowd with the bully and you're doing bully things too. You're being a bully. I don't know, you know.
It'll be, I mean, what are your thoughts on the GOP and what's going to happen with it? Because people are making decisions, right? They're going to have to make decisions. And it seems to me when Donald Trump got the nomination, most of the people in my life didn't think he would stand a chance. And they kind of laughed at me when I said he could win. It seems to me that the GOP, what I said then in 2016 was that the Republican Party would never be the same. Now, I didn't know what it was going to look like. I don't pretend to be prophetic or psychic or anything, but it does seem to me that the party is fractured. And I don't say that the Democratic Party too, like, was Joe Biden your pick?
Yes, he was my pick. I'm saying yes, because are you talking about with
even in the primary? In the primary.
Even in the primaries? Yeah, I don't even. It seemed like the primaries seemed like forever ago.
It does. Well, I think we're.
It's like let me pick these and see who I voted for on the.
Well, we've all been overloaded, right? I mean, if you're paying attention to this, it's overwhelming and exhausting, right?
But I felt like he was my pick even then. I felt like somebody who was geared with the experience of the office, him having been President Obama's VP.
Yeah. Was it just a strategic choice though?
Yes, it was also a strategic choice.
Like who could win the race?
Yes, exactly. Who could win the race? Who could pull in them and have people, whether they be Republicans or Democrats, vote for them. And I felt like he was one of those individuals, which there were other great people on that ticket. Now, I kid you not, but running up against Trump, then that was a different story. So it needed to be somebody who could bring bring a little bit of the both worlds, but also make sure they meet the needs of course, my democratic values and things that need to be done for the people.
Yeah.
And so his platform aligned with that.
Yeah, because there's been this populist movement on the right, but I don't know. It feels to me that there's also a populist movement among millennials on kind of the more liberal end of the spectrum, the Bernie supporters, that I hope the DNC will start speaking to.
I think we're going to have to speak to everybody if we're going to make the movement. I'm saying you can't, and I think that's the danger of how parties work. Sometimes you work the middle, or you work with that certain group, the most popular group, or the group that's been most prominent for several years, but might not be as prominent now. But you have to, change is necessary. If you don't evolve, you'll go extinct. I'm saying, so if you don't evolve to adapt to the needs of the people that you're trying to meet the needs for, then you're going to have a problem. And people get stuck. They get stuck in status quo thinking within these parties. And I think it's important that you continue to meet the needs. And if you're meeting the needs and hearing all the voices, then you'll be fine. But when you start shutting some of those voices out, or oh, they're too far, no, you need to have a conversation. Conversations are important.
Yeah. What have been some of the biggest surprises that you've encountered as you ran for office? I've never run for office, so I'm kind of curious, like, was there anything that you just didn't see coming, or was it all pretty expected?
Well, most things are, well, you always expect some crazy stuff. Probably some of the most interesting things as an African American female candidate that I oftentimes will, you get these, I'm saying I've gotten attacks on Facebook. I'm like, why are you on my page when you don't support me, but you're on my page to talk about me? And, and say, I've had some sexist, downright racist comments. And it's quite interesting because they always come after things like that. And now what, it's very concerning. So that's really interesting. I also feel like as a female too, that it's like there's a higher standard that I have to meet. Like I'm saying, here I am, I'm coming to you with even though I have a doctorate degree, you've seen a track record of service. Yeah, I'm a veteran. I'm an Army veteran. I found out that people don't really care that much about that. I'm serious. I'm like, okay, wow. What do y'all care about? Like, I served my country, and I'm also serving my community. And
you're also Christian, right?
Yes, I'm Christian. I'm educated. I grew up in the South, and then it's like, okay, and I'm knowledgeable. And so then you start to realize that when you're running up against a white male, that the standard is not the same, that they don't have to be, you don't necessarily have to be articulate. The measure is different.
Right.
And I realized that, and then I look at other candidates who are African American females. You got more coming at you than you do as if you're a white male. I remember when I ran in 2018, there were people saying they didn't even think a woman. I'm saying these were women saying we need a good man, a good Christian man in the seat. We need a good man. I'm like, here we are in 2018, and there's probably still some women who are like 2021 who are like, no, a woman shouldn't be running in these seats, shouldn't be, in the seat, but they need a man. And I'm like, oh my gosh. So if they go back to the Bible, there were some great women in the Bible that ran some things, who were leading troops. So don't talk to me about that. So it's very interesting where we still are and how the measure is different for African Americans and definitely African American women. Yeah. I feel like we held to a totally different standard, but that's nothing new. I'm saying, because I grew up with that understanding, is that I had to do more. I had to be even better. Yeah. Because I just couldn't I couldn't be status quo. I'm saying that was the understanding I had, because my hoop was higher. Yeah. To jump.
Yeah, I just listened to a talk, and I can't remember the author's name. She wrote a book on white male mediocrity. I'll send you the link to the talk, because it's exactly kind of what you're talking about, as well as what happens when mediocre white men just don't get our way. Like how that plays out. It's not anything you probably don't already know, but it's a great analysis. So I'll send that to you.
And I'll tell you this too, and I have to say this. I'll tell you this, for the past two candidates that when I ran in 2018, my opponent was John LaHood, and then that was District 175.
And that was who was going to be the Democrat, right? Was that the primary race, or was that the general election?
Oh, that's general. That was the general election. Because there was also a special election that year, because Amy Carter retired. She resigned.
That's right.
So then 2020 with Russ Goodman, who was not the incumbent, because Senator Black retired.
Right.
However, you could never get those individuals to the table. So even what the other parties, it seems that they want from their candidate is like the standard is low, because they never had to. They would never face me in a debate. I'm saying it was quite interesting. Neither one of them would ever come to a debate with me. They would have these different events, and they would invite them to it. You wouldn't see them. Wouldn't show up. And then Russ Goodman did the same thing. Would not show up and stand on the same platform or be in the same room on a debate or any type of platform. I thought that was very interesting.
That's that's quite a statement in itself, isn't it?
Yes, it is. It is. It is. So
what are the future plans?
well, I will run again. For
Cool.
what? I don't know, but I have one. I'll be announcing that later. But still looking at the different changes that are going to occur. The redistricting, their gerrymandering that will happen, and see what these districts are going to look like, and we will see. I'll be praying about that to see which way I should go. But I will run for something because I'm telling you, the momentum is, the energy is high. We have to keep it moving. The people have come out like they never have before. And I feel like people consistently should have someone to vote for. Because for too long in these districts, like 175, only people had was that same Republican who was sitting in that seat time after time, which I won't mention. Amy Carter flipping seats, and same thing with Elvis Black when they flipped and went from Democrat.
Yeah, most folks don't remember that, right? They were Democrats and became Republicans.
Exactly. And that was right after redistricting. That was right at that 10-year census. Right after that point, I think it's 2012 or something like that. And so after that, nobody was running. Yeah. And I think it's critical for people to run. Now I'll encourage other folks to run. I'm going to be looking for other candidates to make sure there's somebody running in these seats. We have to make sure we keep people ready to run. The next leader should always be sitting in the bay, getting prepared to run for our office.
Yeah.
And so,
given the events and given 4 years of Donald Trump, it just seems to me that there's a sense of urgency in the air that folks know that this is bigger than Georgia, that we have to step up or things could go really sideways. I mean, do you feel that?
Yeah, yes, exactly. Because, democracy is not a spectator sport. And I learned that in the Y Club. So I was also a member of Y Club. I remember we had this t-shirt and it said, democracy is not a spectator sport. And I got to give a shout out to my former teacher, Miss Portia Best, who was our advisor. Cool. That was in 7th grade. I was middle school. So it's not a spectator sport. And so the thing about, we have to be active. We have to be alert. People know more about the election process, at least at the federal level, than they ever did before. True. So we have to build off of that, because now people are engaged, they're in tune, they're paying attention. Because if we don't engage with them and we don't make sure they're educated and keep the momentum going, then we can fizzle out. We don't have room for that. Just like you said, that backlash is coming. It's coming. We have a trifecta in the state of Georgia: Republican governor, Republican Senate, and a Republican state house. Yeah. So we have a fight on our hands, and they're not happy. Yeah. So, we have to do all we can, and we have to show up in even greater numbers in 2022 for the midterm election, because things get lost in the midterms. Right. We experienced that under President Obama. We want Biden to have something to work with, and then we also need to be looking at who our next governor is going to be. Yeah. Well, and that should be interesting, right? Given the fact that a lot of folks are ready to throw him under the bus because he didn't do Trump's dirty work for him. Yeah, that's interesting too. Yeah, it really is. Yeah, it's very interesting for all the reasons, because shucks, if we even just look at that election in 2018 in itself, and the fact that you have your Secretary of State who's running for governor and also is also watching, being the umpire over the votes. Yeah. Like somebody should have wrote a law in the legislature about that can't happen again. But of course nobody's gonna do that. Well, he was also involved in the Quitman 10 too, right? Right. That was just criminal how people were treated when he was Secretary of the State. So yeah. Well, I guess one last thing, Treva, and I won't keep you any longer. And again, thank you. It's been everything I thought it would be, and hopefully we can do this again. So it's been my brain's going. I got a zillion questions, but I know you worked all day, so I'll let you get out of here. But if folks, were trying to figure out where to plug in, where to get involved, where would you point them locally? I would tell them to, at this point, to definitely get involved with, join the Democratic Party, reach out to the Democratic Party if you wanting to plug in. it's about the most active civic organization we have around if they want to get involved politically too. And whether that's, you don't have to be running for office. I'm saying,
Right.
but I'm going to tell you, there's 1,500 seats in the state of Georgia going to be up for municipal elections alone. 1,500. That's a lot of seats to be filled. They can make a difference in whether your roads get paved or whether they don't, and those different things, the things that you need. So I would say plug in there, because that's probably your biggest opportunity, just to start knowing what's going on. Start checking out. Start going to the Georgia General Assembly website. Get informed. Look at some, if you're available. Look at what bills are coming up. Look at what they're making decisions about up there, because lots of times these decisions are made in the dark. Unless you got a good legislature, they're not letting you know they're about to vote on something crazy. It's going to affect you, and that's the biggest issue. But I would say plug in with the Lowndes County Democratic Party. We got some new leadership, and so we're going to be doing some.
There's a Facebook presence too, right? They can reach out on Facebook.
Yes, we have reach out on Facebook. Adrian Rivers is our new chair. We got lots of great things going on. I'll tell you also, listen in on your election board, the Lowndes County Board of Elections, or wherever you are, your Board of Elections. You need to pay attention to what they're doing at this point, whether they're closing down a precinct, what they're limiting. You need to sit in on some of those meetings, especially even if you can sit in on them virtually and find out what's really going on. Plug into your city council meetings. So even if you don't join an organization, start visiting your city council meetings. If they're on Facebook, attend. Your county commissioners, see what they're doing. See what decisions they're making about you and how they're using your tax dollars in the community. And those are some ways that you can really get involved, whether it's with the party or not with the party, or whether it's just you being a civically informed citizen. And that's going to be critical for us moving forward, because we can't make progress if you don't know what's going on.
Absolutely. Sounds great. Do you have anything else?
No, I'm gonna just say, for those people who, stay woke, stay woke, vote, and make sure you read materials. I'm going to tell people the biggest piece is misinformation. Even whether you're a Democrat or Republican, triangulate your data. What I mean, triangulate your data, find it in more than one place. Don't just look at one article and say, oh, that's the truth. No, if you can't find it somewhere else in a credible source, it's a problem. NPR, look at some more neutral types of information like NPR and PBS. Look at that news and check your news sources, because lots of people are getting bamboozled and they're believing things that are not true. Also, wear your mask. Okay, wear your mask. Keep a distance. We have this vaccine, but the distribution of those vaccines is going to take a long time. And even after we get the vaccine, you're still going to have to wear your mask. So people, please just stop the spread. Wear your mask and stay home. Stay home as much as you can. Do curbside. Find activities you can do where you're not in an enclosed space. But we got to keep each other safe. It's all up to us, and we can do this. We can get through this.
Amen. Well, it's been a pleasure. I'm going to stop the recording, but thank you so much for taking time out of a long day to talk with me. And I wish you nothing but the best. We need more folks like you. So I appreciate everything you're doing.
You're welcome. I am a little tired. I'm like, golly, I could go on forever. I probably should talk to you at 6:30 though, because when I started, I'm like, oh my gosh, those 30 minutes. Now, had I not said 6:30, I would have needed 7.
It's okay. It worked out. So don't worry about it.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, thank you.